podcast is real life stories from everyday people in recovery. From mental health issues, trauma, substance misuse, and behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for links to social media and a range of books written by your podcast host, Bren Coy.
Are you good?
Yeah. I'm assuming you really want to know and you're not just being polite.
I really want to know.
I mean, so you're in the recovery world, so you kind of get this whole stuff. So I did this. I've been doing this EMDR.
Yes.
Have you tried EMDR?
The light thing.
Yeah.
I've not tried it, but I've heard a lot about it. In fact, I had a member of my staff who was doing it for trauma,
As a
basically. As a
Oh,
therapy.
yeah?
As a therapy.
As
yeah.
a therapist, or?
No, as a therapy for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he did it.
Yes.
What?
He did it for trauma.
Yeah. Have you been doing it for that reason?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of experimental.
Okay.
I mean, everyone has like a degree of trauma, and so I was like doing like some childhood stuff that I was like, okay, I think it's time to deal with this thing.
Yeah.
So I think I'm pretty open about it. I was abused as a little girl, and so
you said that.
Yeah, and so the act, it wasn't the act that was traumatic, it was everything that happens afterwards.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I had some stuff around my mom because she kind of knew about it. But but she got angry about it. And so it was like a very shaming thing. And then when I was about 14 years old, my sister we recognize that now as mental illness. But my sister was like depressed and stuff. And my mom thought that she might commit suicide, but nobody ever said that word. It was like, oh, we need to really stay close to her because we might lose her.
Yeah.
And so the message I got, and I didn't connect it until very recently it was like EMDR. I was doing a 4-step through. Have you ever heard of Big Book Awakening?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's such an intense process. It's really good. I highly recommend it. So 4-step stuff, EMDR, and just like, I have a great sponsor. And anyways, so I do the EMDR, process and stuff, and I'm doing the 4-step, and it's around my sister. And so I've been teaching these self-esteem classes, right? And I'm just so driven, and I'm always learning things and trying to like gather knowledge so that I can be a better use to the people that I serve, right? You do the same thing. I see it in you. So my husband's always like, what is driving you, woman? It's like, I don't need money anymore, right? Like we have the house, we have the stuff. It's not the money. I thought it was the money. It's not the money. And so what it turned out to, I was doing this class, and 2 of the ladies that had registered for my class canceled. Like one was like, oh, I got a bad CT scan. I need to focus on my health. Another lady's like, oh, that's my regular, women's group that I'm committed to. But what it did to me was, because I think, and I didn't put it together, I had like this, like when they say, like when you have an inappropriate response to a situation, it's not about the situation, it's about something else.
Yeah.
I got like depressed. Like I felt like a weight. I'm not a depressed person at all. Like I'm super happy. It's my disposition. But I felt like a weight on me. Like felt like failure. And I was like, that's like my worst thing ever. Is humiliation and failure, like my worst things. And I couldn't get out of bed I spent an entire day in bed. And I was just like watching TV, and like my eyes were leaking. I was like, what is happening? This is not me. I was like, but you know what I mean? I was like, what is happening? So after I talked to my sponsor, she's like, and she had a sick sister as well. And she had some mom issues. And so because of her experience, she was able to connect the dots for me. And she was like, oh, you were like releasing, like maybe you were like releasing, surrendering that job. Like you are no longer responsible for saving somebody else. And what I didn't connect was that I took up this job so that my mom would approve of me, because she wasn't the nurturing, loving mom. She was the critical, kind of hard ass parent. My dad was the nurturing one. And when they divorced, he left. And I always had a close relationship with my dad, but he wasn't in the house anymore. And so my mom was my primary caregiver. And, and I know now as an adult that she was probably really tired. She was working a lot and raising these two kids. And so she was probably tired, but I didn't put it together until my sponsor, because she knows me so well. She was like, "Oh, I bet these are related. You're doing the EMDR, you're doing the 4-step, you're talking about your sister." And it's like, plus I was pushing too hard and so I was burning out. So it was like the perfect storm where it all came together, but it was required for me to like let go. Right. And that letting go process was like grieving. It was like there was like a persona in my mind that was so driven. It's like, if we could just save enough people, if we could just help enough people, then I'll be okay. Or then I'll get the approval. Right. And I didn't recognize, like, all this shit is subconscious. So I wasn't recognizing that was happening. So it was like a couple of like 3 or 4 days of like sadness. I was like, what is going on? And then I talked to my sponsor, she connected the dots, and I was like, whoa. So it was like reframed into, oh, you're healing. You're finally able to let go. I mean, I'm almost 52, and I started, 14 was when I remember, oh, you have to save your sister.
Yeah. Well, and I love you. It's like being okay with not feeling okay, isn't it? Like like when that stuff comes out and you feel sad or you feel whatever, it's about being able to accept that and say, okay, I'm just going to be sad for a little bit, and that's not the end of the world. Like I'm just going to feel those feelings and actually maybe cry and, like get past it, which none of us like doing. None of us like doing that.
Well,
We'd just rather pick up some chocolate or some drugs or some alcohol or cigarettes or whatever and just don't want to go there. Did the EMDR work?
Well, so I believe it was like it all played a part, right?
Yeah.
Like during the EMDR, I didn't really feel anything, right? But I can't help but, and this is like not scientific, it's all subjective, right? So I have no, scientific proof that, but it was just, I mean, it'd be silly for me to pretend like it didn't have any effect, right? It was like, my intent, like I had a very clear intention of going in there to release whatever it is that's holding me back, right? I always have this feeling like something's holding me back from expressing who I really am. I don't know if it's fear, I don't know if it's subconscious beliefs, but I've been doing a lot of work in this class that I teach about reframing negative subconscious beliefs, right? So I'm, my own human guinea pig. So I never assign work without doing it my damn self. So, so I'm doing all this like experimental stuff. And, it's just such an interesting experience because, afterwards I was like, oh, it was like melting. It was like melting out of my body. It was like detox. It felt like detox. And so typically I think when I'm feeling sad, there's something wrong, but there is pain in the release. Sometimes I think like that's how I interpreted that experience, that there was some sort of admirable quality about trying to save somebody to get mom's approval, and maybe it was like all subconscious, but like letting go of the idea that if I saved her, then I would be okay, because then she would approve of me. Because this is all like really old stuff. My mom tells me she's proud of me and she loves me all the time now. Like we never said I love you growing up. She tells me all the time now. So it's not a today thing.
Yeah, it's just old stuff. But it's interesting. Are you all right to include this, by the way?
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. I started recording straight away, and I was just thinking this is really good.
I saw it. Yeah, I see
that. Let me just turn this light on as well, because it's like I can see that I'm in the
Because
dark. That's better.
I think that would be helpful I think that's a helpful
Well,
experience to share.
well, I think it's a great place to start this conversation, to be honest. And like
Yeah.
what I was thinking whilst you were talking was two things. The first one, so I'm pretty much in a very similar place to you at the moment, where I'm kind of like in a really good place in my life and in my recovery, but also kind of like trying to get to those like deep rooted things that are holding me back a little bit. And you know that I've been through over the last basically since our first conversation, I've been through this whole journey of like, coming out, so to speak. From
That's so
Rencoy,
exciting.
and that was really cool. Like it was you that kind of initially planted the seed, and then I spoke to Dennis, and then I spoke to Rob Kelly, and by the end of those conversations, I was like, I think I can probably do more good by just being open about it, and I have since. But the point I was trying to get to is, so what you just described there with the EMDR is exactly the same feeling that I had when I went through my psychedelic experiences. So the ayahuasca and then the psilocybin, and it was about really, like I went through. It was really cathartic, and then I felt this release of these things that I'd been holding on to for years and years and years that I didn't know that I'd been holding on to.
Right,
so
that's the trick.
so I don't think that, like, and I know like the whole psychedelic thing is a bit of a it's a touchy subject for some people because they think of it as being chemical as well. But anyway, but that doesn't matter. Point being is that it doesn't matter what you're doing. It matters that you're doing something, like you're doing some other mode, I think, of healing and therapy. Because, and this is the question that I'm getting to, I would like you to answer, because I have my own thoughts on this, is with the 12 steps, like up until when I started doing all this extra work, I just thought that the 12 steps was all I needed. But what I've since realized is that that for me will only take you so far, because I've done loads of work since. But obviously, I keep working the 12 steps, and I go back and I'll do work with the sponsor and stuff like you just mentioned earlier. But it doesn't always seem to get to the root of the issue and to help me heal from that. It kind of highlights it, but it doesn't always get to the root of it. And I've needed like counseling on top of that. I've needed my psychedelic experiences on top of that. Recently, I've been having life coaching, which has really helped me to focus on, in different areas. So I just wondered what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, the 12 steps saved my life. Like I needed to be alive to heal. Sounds kind of obvious, right? but legit, like I needed that gave me the foundation, right? And it's what's so magical about the 12 steps is every time I address the steps, I get something different out of it, and I am changed. And so I am changed, and then when I readdress the steps again, I get something different out of it because I'm different.
Yeah.
Right. And my life experiences are different at the moment. I used to hear people talk about how they would read the big book and over time, they'd be like, wow, I never read that before. But the truth of the matter is it was always there, but we change. Like we get in, which is normal, right? It's like we are continually evolving. People talk about this idea of whack-a-mole. Oh, I'm working on this character defect and this other one pops up, and then I work on this and something else pops up. That's normal, right? That's meant to be because we're always evolving. And it's not like you can address them all and just be done, right? It's like healing and recovery is a process, and these things, it's almost like they break off slowly, right? It melts slowly. And that's how it's meant to be. It's almost as if, there's this idea that, what if you took all the drugs you ever took in your entire life all at once, it would kill you. It's almost like if all the healing broke off all at once, I don't know what it would do to you. But, we do. Isn't that a funny idea?
That's true,
yeah. Yeah. But so I love the 12 steps. I don't think I'll ever stop doing them just because I get something out of it every time. And what I like about the community is that it is a ready-made place for me to go to share, right? Like sharing is when I realize that the answers are inside me. When I work one-on-one with another woman, that's when I realize that the answers are inside me. And we attract the people, the exact person that we need to work with, because water seeks its own level, right? It works in relationships, it works in sponsorship, it works at work, the kind of things that, that's the law of attraction, right? What you think about, you bring about. And it's all goes down to like emotions and thoughts. And so we're always creating our reality. But it's so interesting that when I'm working one-on-one with another woman in recovery in the 12 steps, I tell her the exact thing I need to hear, because I'm attracting, there's this idea that people are mirrors, that we only see what we love or hate about ourselves. They're just reflecting back to us ourselves. And so we learn to be loving and compassionate when somebody is expressing character defects or behaving badly, let's say. And we go, oh, I get it. They're doing that because they don't know better. And then I am able to share something that helps them. Like they say that empathy is the antidote to shame. And so many of us are carrying around all the shame. And then I'm able to give, like, this woman, I see her and I go, oh, she's looking for help and she needs me. And I can tell her and I give her my empathy, and I see the walls melt and the tears come. And it's like, then we're bonded forever, a little trauma bonding. Never hurt anyone. And then, but then I realize, oh, I deserve that same empathy that I gave her. Right. And so my sponsor a long time ago told me the goal of recovery is to recover our whole selves. Right. And she asked me one time, can you love your unlovable parts? And it felt like a challenge. And I was like, oh, I'm going to try. I don't right now, but I'm going to try. And then like the universe presents me with these women who are broken, and I just want to love them and nurture them and provide them empathy. But what I'm really doing is I'm loving an external piece of my own self that I didn't like before. And then with that empathy that I give them, it like all melts away. And that in the 12 steps is not the only way that happens, right? Like you were talking about the other modalities of healing. There are so many. Like you talked about the psychedelic experiences, which sounds fascinating to me. My son has depression. I've considered sending him to Costa Rica. There's a place that I know of. And I was like, because he's 20 and he's at that age, where their minds are they're just exploding, right? But he's on SSRIs to keep him alive. So they say not to do that. I don't know. Did you hear that? Like if you're on SSRIs, you shouldn't be doing ayahuasca?
Yeah, they do, like the program leading up to taking ayahuasca, you have to come off all of that if you're
okay, they tell you that. Okay, good.
You can't take it if you're on any kind of mental health drugs.
Yeah, I heard SSRIs. I don't know all the classifications, or I'm not but any case, I see such value in those experiences, and I have on occasion with people that were like chronic relapsers, just chronic, like it's life or death. I'm like, you should go do this thing. That might be the mental breakthrough you need to stay alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like these people are like, I have come in contact with some people who are so chronic and severe in their addiction that I'm like, this might be something you need to go do. I'm not a doctor, but
that rhythmia in Costa Rica that you were talking about.
What's that?
Is that rhythmia in Costa Rica that you were talking about?
No, it's a different name. There's another one.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget what it's called right off the top of my head. I can send it to you later if you want to put it in show notes or something.
Yeah, it's just the only reason I'm mentioning it is because rhythmia is the only FDA approved one, isn't it, in the world at the moment?
There's an FDA approved center?
Yeah, in Costa Rica, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's called Rhythmia, RHYTHMIA, and it's FDA approved. It's got everything. It's got shaman, it's got mental health clinicians, it's got everything that you can think of for kind of like holistic health and healing around psychedelics.
Wow.
You can go there. I mean, it's very expensive because it's like the like the premier package, but but yeah, you can go there. I mean, this is what, like, they believe that now in America that, over the next kind of 10, 15 years, that this will become the new
mainstream.
Yeah, mainstream mental health treatment will be all around psilocybin, MDMA, ayahuasca. But it's going to be interesting to see how it goes, because at the moment it's very much wrapped up in the traditions and the culture of the Peruvian Amazon, you know, and as time goes by and it becomes more westernized, it'll be interesting to see whether all that kind of side of it's lost, because it isn't just simply a case of taking these psychedelics and it heals you. It's like there's a massive spiritual element to it that can't really be explained and described unless you have the experience yourself, you know. So
they call it a ceremony. Is that right? They call it a ceremony, an ayahuasca ceremony.
Yeah, it's called a ceremony, but the actual experience of it is like, you know, if I tell this to you, I might sound like I'm crazy telling you this, but when you ingest the medicine, you come into contact with a female entity. You know, they call it Mother Ayahuasca.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
You know, it is like, it's actual, like, it's like you're communicating with a goddess, basically, you know, like the Mother Earth, whatever you want to call it. But not all psychedelics have that component to it. So San Pedro and ayahuasca, I think, are the ones where you get totally in touch with this spirit. Whereas, you know, when I did psilocybin, I didn't have that experience. There wasn't any. I wasn't in touch with the spirit, but I was in touch with everything. It was like I was just part of the universe, you know, like that feeling of oneness. And these are things that, you know, they're kind of like they're the most active component of the psychedelic. You know, it's about the healing through the spirituality of it. But if you've got somebody that doesn't know anything about that and isn't really prepared for that, then it could scare the living daylights out of them.
Yeah, I feel like it's all like a huge component of that. And I'm not speaking from experience. I wish I was, but it's the mental preparation going into it, right? Like you mentally prepare, spiritually prepare. And so, I mean, intention is such a powerful force, no matter what you do, right? Like your intention of starting a podcast, your intention of entering into a sponsor-sponsee relationship with someone, your intention at work, intention plays such a huge part. I think it's fair to take a leap to say that whatever you bring to that experience, like, did you have that sort of intention or like spiritual ceremony feeling when you did the psilocybin?
Not the ceremony. I mean, I when I did the psilocybin, I just literally went for a walk in the woods with my good friend Luke, and he was like a seasoned psychonaut, as they call them, and he just kind of taught me through what it was going to be like, and we just went for a walk. That was it.
Okay.
Basically. We just went for a walk.
So do you feel? I wonder if you did. Or do you plan to do it again?
I would do if I was given the opportunity. I mean, it's not something that I would go necessarily looking for. I mean, that happened in, I think that was nearly a year ago now. Maybe, yeah, I think it was just around about a year ago. And the thought has started to come back to me that, you know, like I would be interested in doing another psychedelic experience. But I'm kind of like, I would prefer to do something different, you know, like I don't necessarily want to keep using psilocybin, or like I would do another ayahuasca ceremony, but it's such a hassle to kind of like go to somewhere to do it and to pay loads of money for it that it isn't something that I necessarily feel like I need to do. So, but if somebody said to me, you know, like there was an opportunity to do San Pedro, for example, and it was something that I hadn't done, and I researched it and I felt as though what that had to offer could be beneficial to my life, then yeah, I would definitely consider it. But this is the thing for me is being in recovery, somebody who's, you know, an alcoholic in recovery or an addict in recovery, whichever way you want to look at it, I'm quite open to it because I know it's not addictive, because I've done it myself. There is no, like, for me to be able to ingest a substance that has an effect on my mind and then to not instantly straight afterwards want to do it again, that's okay as far as I'm concerned, because I know what I'm like when it comes to substances, and if you give me something and I enjoy it, then I just want to do it again and again and again. So I'm not fearful of it in that sense.
Right.
But then at the same time, I'm not kind of like chomping at the bit to do my next experience. You know, I just feel as though I'm very much of like going with the flow. I feel like if it's meant to happen, it'll happen. You know.
Yeah. I was just curious in the sense of like experimenting with the idea of intention and ceremony, like if that has an effect on the outcome.
Well, the ayahuasca ceremony was a ceremony, and that we
For
were.
sure.
I did my intentions before that and everything.
Yeah.
My intention before the psilocybin experience was just simply like we sat in the van before we went for the walk, and we were talking about, you know, and he was asking me what do I want to get out of it, and I just said I just want to kind of like experience the oneness, you know. I want to experience that feeling of like ego dissolution and feeling like one with nature and stuff. And that was the experience that I had. And a byproduct of the experience, because we were talking about our relationships towards the end, when the kind of medicine had kind of worn off and we were walking up the hills and we were just talking about our relationships, we both had quite a big epiphany around the around like the power of the feminine in the universe, and how as two males who are very much like manly men who are the alphas and want, you know, like basically full of pride and full of arrogance and full of ego, we both had this moment where we were just like, shit, like we just need to be of service to our women, you know. It was very humbling actually, and kind of like Luke, my friend, he kind of had this realization around his relationship, and then afterwards, as when we were driving home and I was kind of thinking about what we discussed, I just thought, yeah, like the one thing that gets in the way of my relationship being blissful all the time is just me. Just me being just me just being a bit of a dick. You know, and it's that thing, isn't it? It's like I always in my relationship I can often have it where I'm like, you know, they don't respect me, like she doesn't respect me, the kids don't respect me, like nobody's got any respect for me, and it's all just, you know, it's all just
nobody loves me.
Yeah. It's all just pride and ego and arrogance, and like it's not real, basically. That was the point. And actually since then, over the last kind of year, it's been very much this year about being more of service to the family, you know, and taking on more responsibilities. And obviously my daughter was born in February, so since then literally all I've done is be of service to my family, and it's been great. You know, it's been probably the best.
I was going to ask you how you and your partner, how you and the mama are doing with the new babies. Are hard. Like little kids are hard on a relationship because they are so taxing emotionally and mentally and physically. Like they're very taxing on all levels. And I remember, you know, it was after our second child, my little one was like 2 years old, and we just kind of hit the wall. It was like, who are you? And what the hell what are we doing here? You know, because it just went so out of balance for so long that it's really challenging. And it's, you know, I would encourage you to have people around you who remind you to nurture the relationship. It sounds like you're on track anyway with the whole ego dissolution stuff. I mean, that's a very mature and sort of an awakened response to, you know, life in general is not a man or a woman thing. It's like being of service without, you know, like giving without expectation of return. And that's a really tricky thing. Like for people who are living a life of service, like we do it because it fills some sort of psychological need, but it also brings such joy too, right? Like being in service of your kids, it's like they bring us such joy that if we don't maintain some kind of balance, it's very easy to quickly become, you know, like the effects of being out of balance are like burnout or self-centeredness or self-pity. You know, ego comes back and it's like, where's mine? And, you know, like the goal becomes distorted. Like initially it's like, oh, we want to be of service to help others and let's save the world. And It's like, but when we do it to our own detriment, like it has to be like this symbiotic thing. If you ever go bowling where they have like those bumpers on the sides and the gutters, that's how I like to see sort of like the God of my understanding. It's like bumpers down it's like, oh, you might want to go this way, try to stay in balance a little bit, which is not a razor's edge, right? I'm not talking about perfect balance, but just like a path, a gentle path. And I recently heard, it's kind of off topic, but sort of related, that this idea that no matter how far down the road you go, you're still the same distance from the ditch.
That's good.
I love that idea because people are like, oh, you're in long-term sobriety, you must be whatever. And I'm like, nope, same distance from the ditch as you.
Yeah, that's the conversation that we had last time, isn't it? Because I was saying to
Did
you,
it? Yeah.
yeah, I was saying to you, like, how does it feel, being further down the road? And you were kind of like, well, I'm still just an arm's length from a drink.
Yeah. Still human.
Yeah, I think that, like, that's the thing, isn't it, with recovery, is that, like, we on our best day we can be absolutely fantastic, but on my worst day, like I had a couple of days earlier in the week where I was just back to my old restless, irritable, and discontented self, and it
comes back quick.
Yeah, and it feels no different to how I felt when I was back in my drinking days. Really, it's just that, like, just misery really. But with the helping people stuff, I mean, like now, whereas in the past, that like I would, let's say, just for example, the easiest example I can think of is things like tidying up after my partner or my kids or any of that kind of stuff. I would start to get resentful, and then it would build and build and build and build for days, if not weeks, and then eventually it would come out in some terrible argument, which has got nothing to do with the thing that I think we're arguing about, and has actually got to do with all this resentment that's come from me having to, like, wash the dishes or that, whatever that may be. And now I've got the self-awareness that I can catch myself when that thinking starts to happen, and kind of laugh at it really, and kind of just say, like, this is like ridiculous. At the end of the day, all I'm doing is, like, I'm just doing stuff for my family, and that's what I should be doing. and it's like my sense of entitlement, for some reason, my ego says, you should.
I take care of my kids.
Yeah.
Fool, you're supposed to.
Exactly. Yeah, and you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing the washing up. You shouldn't be doing this. And it's like, just,
isn't that an interesting thought? Like, you shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Like, this is like, do you have that idea of, like, there are pink jobs and there are blue jobs? Like, the pink jobs are the lady jobs and the blue jobs are the
kind of, up until recently. Well, working with Dennis has really helped me, actually, because we talked about all this stuff, and we spoke about, like, that sense of entitlement, and I was kind of like discussing how that was born of live. I'm an only child, and I was living in a household where I didn't really have to do that much. Like, my parents pretty much did everything up until a point when I was kind of like in my early teens, where I'd be like washing the car for pocket money, or doing jobs around the house or whatever. But I never really had to do anything. There was never that kind of sense of
like ownership or
like
obligation, or
responsibility and obligation wasn't really anything that was kind of instilled into me, because I think I was basically pretty much spoiled, really. And now, as a 40-year-old man,
oh damn,
yeah, as a 40-year-old man, I can kind of still fall back into that sense of entitlement that has developed from childhood, because everything was always done for me. So it's not a good idea to not get your kid to do, like, to have to do certain things, like washing up and setting the table, and those are the types of things that we're instilling into our kids now. Is like, they've got to do certain things to earn the pocket money at the end of the week, and they're only like the 10 and 12, so to learn that at such an early age is really, really good, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Yeah, this idea of pulling your own weight, like when our boys were small, like my boys know they do dishes, they do laundry, that kind of. I ask them to walk the dog, stuff like that. It's like, you live here too, and by the way, it's like I'm not doing your like we gave up doing their laundry a long time ago, but when they were little, they had to separate the laundry. So like we would just do these big loads of laundry. There's four of us, right? And they would have to like separate the laundry. Like this is all mom's stuff, that's dad's stuff, that's Travis's, that's Tyler's. And then everybody would take their stuff to the room, and I didn't ask them to fold, and what you do with your laundry is your business. But and then the dishes. And so what we would do is like one would do the laundry one week, and then the other one would do the dishes for like a week at a time, because it was hard to keep track of whose turn was it to do the dishes. Right, that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, you have it for a solid week, and you have that for a solid week, and then you swap a little bit. But I do think it's like when I grew up, I don't know if it's a Mexican thing. My mom was from Mexico City. It's like the girls learned to do everything early. So by the time I was in the third grade, I could wash the floor like with a rag and a bucket, like hands and knees, like wash the floor, clean the bathrooms, clean the kitchen, like laundry, like all that stuff early. But it was like, this is our house and mom is busy and we all have to pitch in. I do think that.
You
Yeah.
were good wife material there, yeah.
No, I'm terrible. I was terrible wife material, to be perfectly honest, because I'm a total slob by nature. So it has taken years of training. No, that's not the right word. But you know what I'm saying? It's like my husband is like the neat freak. It's like I married my mom. he's like a total neat freak. So he's the one. And it's interesting because I have to tell him, stop doing stuff for them. They need to learn to do stuff, because he's one of those people that's always in constant motion.
Yeah.
So it's like, just sit down for a second, like give them a chance to do some stuff. If you're always doing for them, they'll never learn.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think,
parenting is a funny thing.
yeah, I mean it's definitely been an eye opener already just since Alice was born. Well,
Yeah,
apart
because when you got the girls, they were already a little bit older, right? They weren't
yeah,
babies. You got
yeah,
them.
they were 4 and 6 when I came into the live, so it's yeah, it was they were already kind of like they already had their personalities, and they were already
Yeah.
kind of like well on the way to becoming little madams.
How cute.
And now with my little baby, it's just interesting seeing her grow. Well, you've read the beginning of the book, haven't you? My new book, which
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like, okay, so the beginning of your book, it was like, I was like, whoa. I mean, it's like there were some things I had to read and reread. But what I thought was so interesting about the beginning of the book was this idea of like really exploring like the idea of consciousness, like how philosophers see it, how scientists see like what is consciousness. Like I have never really stopped to think about it. Like I've been exposed to like I'm a voracious learner, and so I've been exposed to some things on a surface level. But I was like I went there with you in the deconstructing of what is it and what do other people have, like this group of people have this to say about conscious. And I was like, when I set it down and I walked away, like it was like doing like mental push-ups. I was like, oh, like I started thinking, I don't know, it was just such an interesting experience to walk away from just even the beginning of it and think of like, oh, this is really making me see things differently, which I love, right? I love anything that can expand my mind a little bit. So I haven't finished it yet, so I'm excited to finish it and write the foreword. Woo!
yeah, I'm looking
It's
forward to that.
exciting.
Well, she was like, I mean, she was like my case study really, because
Right.
I started writing the book, and obviously, like you said, I'm investigating consciousness and what people have to say about it. But then I've obviously got my own consciousness, and I've also got the consciousness of this tiny little baby to observe. And what was very, very clear right from the very beginning was that there wasn't anything going on. Like there was nothing going on at all. All she could do was see what was just in front of her, And it was like, you know, she was constantly in this, she was just constantly in like this blissful state where she was either hungry. That was the only time she would ever kind of like get upset, was if she was hungry or if she was tired. And then other than that, she was perfectly fine at all times. And since then, you know, it's been nearly 8 months now, and she's obviously like she's grown a lot in those 8 months. And it's been amazing to watch a character start to develop. And she's just taking bits from, you know, from all around her, and like, and just developing. And but there's this essence of her, you know, like there's definitely this essence of her as a unique individual person, that she hasn't learnt that from what's around her. She just has that within her. And I think that's amazing. Like, I think it's amazing how it's made me kind of researching the book and seeing her grow has made me as confounded that, like, there is definitely this element of a human being that is not physical, and that is like spiritual, and that is like, you know, whatever you want to call it, the spirit or the consciousness or whatever. That is something that for me is a reality, you know. And when we die,
it's an amazing experience.
And through the ayahuasca experience, what I experienced there was that when we die, because that is like your ego death, is that whatever that essence is, that is still, that carries on, you know, that definitely carries on. I don't know how that works, but yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at with it at the moment. So yeah, it's been a cool experience writing it.
Yeah, very cool. I can't wait to finish it. I'm sure you can't wait for me either, because you're like, where's my forward?
I've had a few people that have read it already, and I've had like some really, really good reviews back, which has been really nice. I mean, David Essel has written a review for it. Rob Kelly's writing a review for it. Dennis is going to write a review for it, and I've not had any bad feedback yet or any suggestions to change it. So yeah, I'm really pleased. It's been great.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have I'm glad, I'm honored to be one of the ladies that gets to review it.
Have you started writing your book yet?
Yeah, I write it in fits and starts. I have a ridiculous amount of things going on at the moment. I told you about the self-esteem class that I'm doing. And it was interesting that, you know, the self-esteem class is 6 weeks, and we cover some pretty big topics, right? We cover, you know, how beliefs are formed, how to change identify and reshape your subconscious beliefs. We talk about things like laws of attraction, and how to leverage those ideas for behavior change. And then we talk about like the forgiveness process. We talk about, actually, I should take a step back, because in the very beginning, we talk about what would your ideal look like? Like, what do you want? Like, a lot of people don't even really know what they want, right? But it's like getting clarity about what you really want, believing that you can get that. And then what are the blocks? Right? Where is the resistance? And the resistance typically, what's behind that is typically guilt and shame. And so in class, we do this thing called the forgiveness process, right? And so it's a lot of the concepts that, you know, you hear through like 12-step programs, or religion has like confession and things like that. But it's about getting permission to let go of things that you feel guilt and shame about, through things like empathy and compassion, like self-empathy, self-acceptance, all those things. And these are pretty big topics, right? Like, just because you have like a cursory exposure to them and you get some understanding, it takes years for these ideas to, you know, to melt away all the you know, defenses that we create to survive in this world, right? Like, we have to come up with like some sort of a set of survival skills just to survive. And then recovery is a lot about dissolving those defenses, right? Some survival skills that we develop in childhood don't translate to healthy relationships as adults. And then I was like, they need ongoing support. So I am in the process of building a membership site called the Brainwashers Club. And the brainwashers, the brainwashing typically has like a negative connotation to it, but it's like, it's interesting that the concept of, there are these people out there in the world, government agencies or cult leaders are able to do like these brainwashing things to people and make them do these terribly negative things. It's like, well, if it's possible to do it in the negative, why can't we do it in the positive? And so that was kind of where the idea came from. And actually, when I was first sober, I was dating this guy, and I could quickly see that this was a relationship that wasn't going to pan out because I was in recovery and he was not, for a variety of reasons. And he told me, he goes, I think those people are brainwashing you. And I was like, yeah, they totally are. Like I was down for that. Like he meant it in a negative way, but I could see that like my life was changing in such a positive way. I was like, yeah, they're totally brainwashing me. Thank God, because my mind is dirty. So it was a good thing. And so I was like,
that as well. I've always said that it's positive brainwashing, isn't it? It is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it is. And there's nothing wrong. Like all the mantras that you learn through the meetings and the 12 steps and everything to do with it is just literally like deprogramming you and reprogramming you in a positive way.
In a positive way, so that you can live your best life, as Oprah would say. So I started developing this membership site called the Brainwashers Club, and it's like there's a sobriety toolkit, there's like what to do in your first year, and then we're going to have live events where I bring in experts to speak on different topics, because like you and I know that there are so many different modalities of healing, right? There's, we talked about some of them, but there's like somatic healing, there's breath work, and then we need to do some things like learn to manage our money. And, there's like a whole bunch of neuroscience, and there's hypnotherapy. I mean, EMDR, there's EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique tapping. There are so many things. So there will be all these experts coming in, like, so I'll have live events where I bring somebody in, and then people can attend these meetings and do some Q&A. I would also love to there'll be some like regular weekly meetings where, have you ever heard of Byron Katie?
Yeah.
She has something called The Work, and the work revolves around 4 questions, like where you start questioning your own thoughts. And I love that. I love Byron Katie's. There's like, you can get the PDF for free off the internet. It's the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. And it's amazing because it kind of goes along with that concept that if you spot it, you got it, right? If you see it in someone else, you have it yourself. And this at the bottom line is to gain empathy for yourself. And I love Byron Katie's Judge Your Neighbor worksheet because that's like good to help you work through a situational type of thing. It's like, I'm having this fight with my boyfriend. I have a difficult coworker at work. I mean, those are like work relationships, home relationships can like what you said earlier. It's like they can determine the level of your happiness, right? Yeah. And so the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet is great for like situational. It's like the people that are challenging you are such a gift because they're helping you. They're forcing your hand really to deal with whatever it is that's going on with you subconsciously. So they truly are teachers. And it seems, I remember that idea was like, oh, the person that I hate most is my teacher. It's like, fuck you. No, they aren't. I hate that person. But they really are. Like when you set your ego aside and you have the courage to like look within, like what is it triggering in me? And then you heal yourself, then they don't trigger you anymore. Right. So they are your healers. But so I would love to have like a weekly call where people come prepared with like, I have a situation I need to work through, and then we can kind of do it on the call. So I'm really excited about the Brainwashers Club, but it's a big project, right? So it's another thing. And I work full time, right? And I got, coaching. I do coaching. And so I have a set of current set of clients right now. So I do all that, but it's kind of interesting. It's like, I would love to let go of my day job and just focus on this full time. And I'm in sort of that transition place where I've just sort of had to look at it like my day job is funding the work that I do that feeds my soul, right?
Yeah.
But it's a lot. So I need some of these projects to get finished.
It's good that you said right at the very beginning about that you recognize that the money wasn't driving you as well, because like even though we do have to earn money in order to be able to do these things, like you just said, that's something that I realized that like over the last few years, that the thought of having to just work and work and work like all the hours God sends like I used to earn loads of money just kills me. It makes me feel just absolutely horrendous. And
Yeah.
now I've pretty much got like the perfect work-life balance. I do have a full-time job, but like it's manageable, and then I've got all my free time to be with the family and to do this type of stuff. So, and one of the things I was going to say though, when you were talking about all those different things, is you're similar to me, because like I feel like I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none, because I've got like I'm into like loads of different things.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's always been the staple has been the 12 steps. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
always like branched out and learnt about this and that and the other, and then I'll always go back to the fellowships, and I'll always go back to the 12 steps, because that's kind of just what works for me, like especially when I just think about it in terms of like steps 10, 11 and 12, doing that every day. I make sure that every single day I do those 3 steps and hand it over as well, obviously step 3. But then I'm okay, I'm all right. But I love looking at all these different modalities of healing, because one thing's for certain, it's not a one size fits all type thing, is
Mm-mm.
it? And everybody has got a unique personality that will gravitate more towards one thing over another. So for there's millions of people out there that the 12-step fellowships would never work for, because it just I mean, I spoke to David Essel, I did a podcast with him, and he was kind of like, just like he'd done 12-step, and he was like, it's just not for me, like this is the way that I live my life, this is the way that I work. And I just thought, good for you. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
If that works for you and you're happy, then fantastic.
Which is, leaves plenty of work for people like me and you, right? Like I'm also in the process of developing like a 30-day boot camp. It's called Sobriety Reset. It's like a 30-day boot camp, and it's addressing, what is your why? Answering the big question, am I an alcoholic? Which I actually sidestep, because I understand now that the DSM-5, which is like the medical book for diagnosing mental illness, they don't even recognize the term alcoholic. It's alcohol use disorder, and it seems to fit better because it talks about a spectrum, right? Like people are on a spectrum when it comes to alcohol use disorder. Like the alcoholic is like, physically dependent, and their life is in shambles, and they can't let it go, and powerless, and that's where a lot of people go. That's why a lot of people go to A. What about everybody else, right? Like there are entire websites and communities revolved around not drinking that are kind of anti AA, which makes me super sad because I get so much out of it. I wish everybody would have that experience that I had. But for a variety of reasons, like it has very Christian overtones. It's very male dominated. I heard one woman use the word misogynistic, and I was like, where are you getting that? Like, that's not, I don't get that at all. So it makes, and I go, okay, that's about her. She has some trauma. But she needs help too, right?
Yeah.
Like, what about her? Like, we can't leave her out of the cold either. So, there's all kinds of communities that have sprung up online that are like, okay, you don't want to go to A? That's cool. Here are all the things. You don't have to go to meetings. You don't have to be around men. You don't have to be around women. You don't have to talk about God. Here are all the things. Here are all the concepts.
Yeah.
And I have one now too. So one of the things I'm creating is the Sobriety Reset. It's a 30-day boot camp, and it's sort of like all the best parts of everything that I've ever learned, everything from like, the inventory, the making amends, to developing a spiritual practice, the EFT, MDR, neuroscience. I'm obsessed right now with Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford, and he's been going on all these podcasts. He's on Lewis Howes and Rich Roll. I think the Rich Roll podcast was like 2 hours long. I've listened to it like 3 times, because he talks about the dopamine reward system. And Rich Roll obviously he cares a lot about addiction, right? And so they're talking about how to use you're rewiring our brain, right, with these neurochemicals. And so he has the most practical applications to using your dopamine reward system to reprogram behavior.
Yeah.
Right. And so you do the hard. And so I go, oh, like I was been able to connect the dots with like the 12 steps and meetings and things like that. It's like you go to a meeting because you have to. He talks about behavior change requires urgency and focus. Like, who doesn't have urgency and focus when they're about to die from their addiction? It's like, we have urgency, we have focus, right? And that's required. And then what happens is like we go to this place and we do the hard thing, which is be honest. Right. And what do we get in return? We get love and affection, and that kicks off your dopamine. Right.
Yeah.
So your brain like these things get transferred into like your hippocampus, and just all this stuff starts happening. You're literally, and then what's interesting is he talks about neuroplasticity in adulthood that happens during sleep. Right. And I remember that first year I was in recovery, I slept a lot. What I didn't realize is my brain was healing. My brain was healing because my, you have these neuroreceptors that live on your brain cells, right? And they're the ones that are receiving the dopamine. It's like the funnel to allow the dopamine into the brain, right? So that you experience that happiness. Well, if you flood your brain with too much dopamine, those neuroreceptors, they retract. And so there's not as many on the surface of those cells, right? And so you're not actually able to receive the dopamine. And that's why, and so it explains so much. Like early recovery, people are like, I'm bored. I'm bored. I don't have any fun anymore. It's like, well, your brain is healing. You jacked up your brain to the point where it had to try to protect itself. Your brain is trying to maintain homeostasis, this level, right? Like we all have like this thermostat. We don't get too high, we don't get too low. But then we start introducing all these drugs into our system, alcohol, pills, whatever. It affects your dopamine reward system. And so your body is trying to protect itself. So people in early recovery are like, I just don't have fun anymore. It's like they don't experience joy. And that's just a short term. That's short term. Like you got to give yourself, your brain is literally healing, right? Like addiction, he defines it as a narrowing of things that trigger the dopamine response. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's true. Because, I mean, you see people who give up people who used to love to play music or enjoy their family or hobbies. It's like all that stuff falls by the wayside because the only thing that matters is the drugs and alcohol.
Well,
and it's because...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I've just started taking some supplements that David Essel suggested to me that are about stimulating the dopamine reward pathways. So what he said to me was he recommended, I'll have to email you the name of them because I can't remember what they're called, but basically they're like, you take like 50 milligrams of each of these 2 tablets every morning, and that stimulates the dopamine in your brain so that you're not craving all the way through the day. And then in the evening you have another one of these supplements, and it because he said as you get older, like in an evening where I used to eat chocolate late at night, like always around 8-9 o'clock at night, I'd always eat chocolate. And he said the reason why is because as you get to an adult, you want to relax at night. And he said, and when you eat chocolate, it relaxes your brain. So he introduced me to this other supplement that I now take in the evening, and I swear to God, I've not had any sugar for over 2 weeks, and I've not had any cravings at all.
It's not like melatonin or...
Cannot remember the name of it.
Okay, I'll have to put them in the show notes.
Honestly, it's been amazing, and also what you just said there about the whole dopamine reward. I'm going to send you my first book, Addiction Prevention, and the last book before this new book, the Spiritual Malady.
Oh my God, you're such a prolific writer. Oh my gosh.
That's what the whole thing was about. The whole thing was about the gradient of addiction, and it was about the how every single drug and alcohol and behavior that we become addicted to has this effect on the dopamine reward pathways. Yeah. Well, listen, I'm gonna have to go because I've got to go and get the baby in a moment. So
get the baby. Oh my goodness, I could talk to you forever. Well, I enjoy our conversation so much as always. We'll have to do this again on my podcast too. But maybe you can send me the recording and I'll publish it on mine. We'll get
cool.
both sides of the pond.
Get them both up, definitely. No, it's been a pleasure. I'm sorry I had to do a hard out there, but I've got family responsibilities.
Listen, babies come first.
Yeah. Okay, well, good to see you again anyway.
Good to see you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks very much for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the subjects discussed in the podcast, check out the links underneath the podcast description for a range of mutual aid organisations. And also, don't forget to check out www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for all my books and social media links. And if you'd like to support the podcast financially, visit www.patreon.com/lifeinrecovery. And also, just a last word about my sponsors, Dennis Berry Life Coaching. So visit www.dennisberry.com for a free consultation, and don't forget to use the code words Life in Recovery for 10% off your next 3 sessions. And also, if you visit sugaraddiction.com/Life in Recovery, you can download a free copy of Mike's book all about sugar addiction. And if you're really serious, check out his 30-day sugar freedom challenge whilst you're there. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.